Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. I swore all the way back in the wildlands that I would get my revenge. A proud expression appeared on Bai Xiaochun's face as he made his decision. Back at the Great Wall, Chen Hichan had acted with utter impunity. Completely ignoring how important Bai Xiaochun was, he had sent him into that labyrinth, and yet, that was not the end of his persecution. He then went on to oppress the river-defying sect. HMMMPHH. Alright, Chen Hichan, this isn't me looking for revenge, it's you being an intolerable bully. The matter's set. When anyone bothers me, I'll take it out on Chen Hichan. Swishing his sleeve, he marveled at how important of a figure he was now. I can't find big fatty Zhang, so I'll take it out on Chen Hichan. If someone thinks about trifling with the river-defying sect, I'll take it out on Chen Hichan. If someone looks at me the wrong way, I'll take it out on Chen Hichan. If someone plots against me, I'll take it out on Chen Hichan. Bai Xiaochun was convinced that he was so marvelous, no one would ever truly be able to comprehend the full extent of it. That was especially true when he pondered how Chen Hichan would probably go crazy after what he was about to do. He chuckled excitedly, and the truth was that was exactly how things would play out. Although he couldn't kill Chen Hichan, his plan of venting his anger on him if anyone caused problems for him would drive the man crazy. Although Chen Hichan was in the mid-diva realm, in terms of battle prowess, he didn't match up to Bai Xiaochun at all. The fact that Bai Xiaochun had single-handedly fought 5 devas, killing 2 and seriously injuring 3, left Chen Hichan completely struck with fear. Were that not the case, he wouldn't have gone into secluded meditation after returning from the river-defying sect. And it was the same with Bai Zhenchen and Li Shundao. And yet, Chen Hichan clearly didn't understand how Bai Xiaochun operated. Never in his wildest dreams could he have imagined that going into hiding wouldn't stop Bai Xiaochun from coming to cause problems. With the swish of a sleeve, Bai Xiaochun shot across the rainbow toward Chen Hichan's residence. Chen Hichan had a sprawling, luxurious estate in the south of the Blue Rainbow District. Furthermore, he didn't live there alone, he had quite a few members of his clan in the estate with him. All of the devas lived in such a way. In the very middle of the sprawling estate was a lake of crystal clear water, within which lazed a whole school of goldfish. The lake was actually part of the rainbow itself, which was a marvelous thing in and of itself. Next to the lake was an ordinary-looking log cabin, which was actually a holy place to the Chen clan. And as the patriarch of the clan, and a diva, it was only natural that Chen Hichan lived there. As Bai Xiaochun whistled through the air, rumbling booms echoed out, and the clouds churned up above. Rippling distortions spread out in all directions from him. It immediately attracted a lot of attention from the other disciples. Furthermore, because of the close proximity to where the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars trials were held, many people from there looked over as well. What's that sound? That's Patriarch Bai? Within the Chen clan estate were numerous clan members who noticed the thunderous roar, much to their shock. When they looked over, they saw something like a shooting star rocketing toward them with incredible speed. A moment later, it was right there in the air above them. Instantly, the pressure of a diva weighed down in all directions like the will of the heavens, casting the cultivation bases of everyone down below into full chaos. The person up above was pure and fair, with a proud expression on his face, and his hands clasped behind his back. His chin was stuck up as though he were the most powerful expert in the world. He was none other than Bai Xiaochun. The fact that so many people were paying attention to him caused Bai Xiaochun to feel very pleased. Raising his voice, he said, "Chen Hichan, get the hell out here and greet Lord Bai." He had intentionally fused with heaven and earth and surpassed heavenly will, which made his voice boom especially loud. It was almost like an attack, a shockwave that caused many Chen clan cultivators' faces to fall as they staggered backward. Even the disciples by the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars trials could hear his words, and it caused quite a commotion. Elder Bai went to cause problems for Elder Chen? From the tone of Elder Bai's voice, it sounds like he wants to fight. The cultivators in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect almost couldn't believe what they were seeing, and many of them flew up into the air in the hopes of getting a closer look. After all, conflicts between devas, although not completely unheard of, rarely progressed past simple friction. As Bai Xiaochun's voice echoed out, Chen Hichan was seated cross-legged in the log cabin, meditating. Suddenly, his eyes snapped open, and an expression of wrath appeared on his face. Before the events at the river-defying sect, if anyone had done something like this, he would have snorted coldly, rushed out, and killed the offender immediately. But now, he simply gritted his teeth. After all, he knew that because of Bai Xiaochun's shocking battle prowess, the two of them weren't on the same level. However, the fact that Chen Hichan was biting his tongue actually made Bai Xiaochun more irritated. Once again, he raised his voice and said, "What's going on, Chen Hichan? You're a diva, I'm a diva. Here I am at your front door. Don't tell me you aren't going to come out and say hi? How insolent." With that, Bai Xiaochun took an angry step forward, heading into the Chen clan and toward the log cabin. The other Chen clan cultivators were trembling in their boots, and didn't dare to interfere. Within moments, Bai Xiaochun's incredible speed had him closing in on the log cabin. In fact, ripples spread out across the surface of the lake, and even the goldfish began to tremble in fear. At this point, Chen Hichan couldn't hold back his anger any longer. He blurred into motion, flying up into the air and waving his hand to send a blast of wind at Bai Xiaochun. "What are you doing, Bai Xiaochun?" At the same time, Bai Xiaochun unleashed a fist strike, striking the wind blast and sending a terrifyingly loud boom out in all directions. Chen Hichan grunted and fell back a few paces. However, Bai Xiaochun's expression remained exactly the same as ever. His fleshly body was so powerful it didn't seem necessary for him to defend himself. In fact, he continued forward and prepared to unleash another attack. "What am I doing? You brought this upon yourself, Chen Hichan. You know exactly what you did." In the blink of an eye, he was right in front of him. Chen Hichan's face was a mask of grimness as he performed a double-handed incantation gesture to send another attack at Bai Xiaochun. A boom rang out, and Chen Hichan fell back further. However, Bai Xiaochun didn't slow down at all. Bai Xiaochun's performance so far had Chen Hichan grumbling bitterly in his heart. His anger continued to burn, and yet, he still held back. As he retreated, he said, "The demigod patriarch already issued his orders about the river-defying sect, Bai Xiaochun. You've already killed Patriarch Starry River and Patriarch Dao River. What are you acting like this for? What happened back at the Great Wall was a misunderstanding. This has nothing to do with the river-defying sect or the Great Wall, Chen Hichan. Don't play dumb." Bristling with anger, Bai Xiaochun utilized his undying hex, blasting toward Chen Hichan. Performing an incantation gesture with his right hand, he waved, sending frigid chi blasting out, and summoning 9 frigid projections. The projections immediately surrounded Chen Hichan on all sides. Chen Hichan's face fell. He quickly waved his hands out in front of him, causing a black shield of light to spring up and block the 9 frigid projections. Falling back again, he angrily yelled, "What exactly are you doing, Bai Xiaochun? I'm not playing dumb. Explain yourself." When Bai Xiaochun realized that Chen Hichan's voice was louder than his own, he felt very displeased. With even greater volume than before, he shouted, "You're the culprit here, and you want me to explain? I'm not leaving until things are settled, Chen Hichan." "Why you? Chen Hichan was absolutely enraged by this point. He could tell that Bai Xiaochun hadn't come about the river-defying sect, and yet, couldn't think of what it might be about. After returning to the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect, Chen Hichan had gone directly into secluded meditation, and had done nothing to provoke Bai Xiaochun since. Therefore, when Bai Xiaochun called him a culprit, it caused his anger to burn even hotter. It was a strange feeling. Chen Hichan was used to bullying other people, but now, he was the one being bullied. "Bai Xiaochun," he raged. "This is complete and utter bullying." Even still, he had no idea what he had done to provoke Bai Xiaochun. "Complete and utter bullying. How dare you, Chen Hichan?" Bai Xiaochun roared, clearly not ready to give up. Booms rang out over and over as they began to fight back and forth. Everyone in the Chen clan was completely shocked by what was happening, and the other cultivators watching from other locations were similarly astonished. In fact, the other 4 devas on the Blue Rainbow sent their divine sense over to watch as well. However, neither Patriarch Steel Veins nor Li Shendao or Bai Zhenchen did anything to interfere. Of course, both Li Shendao and Bai Zhenchen were completely taken aback by the fact that Bai Xiaochun had Chen Hichan at a complete disadvantage. Furthermore, because of everything they had witnessed in the river-defying sect, both of them were leery of Bai Xiaochun, and currently didn't dare to get involved. "This doesn't have anything to do with us." What was fellow Taoist Chen thinking? This is Bai Xiaochun's moment of triumph. What is he doing causing problems for him right now? Oh well, he's the one who went and pissed off Bai Xiaochun, so he'll just have to resolve the situation on his own. After conferring briefly, both Bai Zhenchen and Li Shendao agreed that it was really Chen Hichan's fault for being so obtuse. As for Chen Hichan, he was on the verge of going completely mad. If he were aware of why Bai Xiaochun was going all out to attack him, he might have been able to deal with the situation. But he really had no idea what was going on, and to make things worse, when he asked Bai Xiaochun to explain, Bai Xiaochun sarcastically responded that he already knew. As Bai Xiaochun circled back around for another powerful attack, Chen Hichon gritted his teeth, shot backward, and cried, "Did someone from my clan offend you? Is that what happened? If so, then it doesn't have anything to do with me." "Someone from your clan?" Bai Xiaochun shouted. "Like hell. It was you, Chen Hichon. Still trying to act dumb? You think I'm 3 years old or something?" Chen Hichon wanted to scream out loud in rage. It seemed completely impossible to communicate with Bai Xiaochun, and no matter how he racked his brains, he couldn't think of what he had done recently to provoke an insane reaction like this. Chen Hichon's expression couldn't have been more unsightly as he backed up again. Bai Xiaochun was just too strong, and his defenses were virtually impenetrable. Chen Hichon simply had no way to deal with him. It was about this time that an urgent voice rang out from a short distance away. "Stop it, Xiaochun." Two beams of light approached, containing a man and woman. They were none other than Zhao Tianzhao and Chen Yushan. Chen Yushan seemed very anxious, whereas Zhao Tianzhao had a bit of a begrudging expression on his face. As soon as they had heard that Bai Xiaochun was going to see Chen Hichon, they had rushed over. They really had no choice but to come. On the one hand, Bai Xiaochun was their friend, but on the other hand, Chen Hichon was a master and father to the two of them respectively. If anyone else had come to interfere, Bai Xiaochun would have been able to simply ignore them. But he and Zhao Tianzhao had shared quite a few trials and tribulations. Plus, Zhao Tianzhao had done a lot for the river-defying sect, and had even defied Chen Hichon in his attempts to help. Bai Xiaochun had long considered him a close friend. Therefore, instead of continuing to attack Chen Hichon, he backed up a bit and looked over at Zhao Tianzhao. Seeing that, Chen Hichon breathed a sigh of relief. However, he kept a very grim expression on his face as he stared coldly at Bai Xiaochun. Zhao Tianzhao flew over at top speed, planting himself between Bai Xiaochun and his master. Looking both anxious and slightly irritated, he said, "Xiaochun, you, eldest brother," Bai Xiaochun interrupted, "your master has gone way too far this time. The reason I came here today has nothing to do with the river-defying sect. Your master has committed a wicked and immoral act, and has bullied people to an outrageous degree." When Chen Hichon heard that, he gritted his teeth even harder, and then loudly said, "You need to explain the situation clearly, Bai Xiaochun. What did I do to you? You want me to explain clearly?" Bai Xiaochun said, glaring back at him. "You did the deed, and yet you don't know? Fine, I'll just beat the explanation out of you." His energy flared, and he made to advance. However, the irritated Zhao Tianzhao quickly interfered. "Xiaochun," he said loudly. Bai Xiaochun looked over at him, and stopped in place. "Eldest brother," he said angrily, "this doesn't have anything to do with you. Your master has really just gone way overboard. Remember Big Fatty Zhang and Shu Baosai? They're good friends of mine, and fellow disciples to the both of us. However, your master kidnapped them, and when I asked for them back, he pretended to not know what was going on." Zhao Tianzhao's eyes widened with surprise. He had heard of Big Fatty Zhang and Shu Baosai, and what Bai Xiaochun had said was true. Neither of them had been seen or heard from in quite a while. To hear Bai Xiaochun accuse his master of snatching them actually caused Zhao Tianzhao to hesitate for a moment, and then look over at Chen Hichon. Chen Hichon's eyes were as wide as Zhao Tianzhao's as he stared blankly at Bai Xiaochun. He really had no idea what was happening, and in fact, had never even heard of Big Fatty Zhang and Shu Baosai. Struggling to contain his wrath, he grated, "I didn't do anything to those two. I don't even know who they are. You have the wrong person, Bai Xiaochun." The truth was that he really didn't want to have Bai Xiaochun pissed off at him, so therefore, he added, "That's not how I do things." "Well, if you didn't do it, then who did?" Bai Xiaochun said, his eyes narrowing angrily. Looking back at Zhao Tianzhao, he said, "I won't let this drop, eldest brother. Big Fatty Zhang and Shu Baosai are good friends of mine, and right now, I don't even know if they're still alive. If this is really my fault, then I'll apologize later." With that, he dashed past Zhao Tianzhao toward Chen Hichon. Moments later, booms rang out as the two of them began fighting again. Zhao Tianzhao smiled bitterly as he looked at Bai Xiaochun and then Chen Hichon. Finally, he sighed. Obviously, he wasn't in a position to try to separate them, and furthermore, he actually suspected that his master could be lying. Chen Hichon felt like he was going crazy. "I told you I didn't do it, Bai Xiaochun. Why are you acting like this?" Not willing to be outshouted by Chen Hichon, Bai Xiaochun raised his voice even more as he shouted, "You're the only person in the sect who I have a grudge with. If it wasn't you, then who was it? Drop the act, Chen Hichon. If you don't hand over Big Fatty Zhang and Shu Baosai right now, then I'll escalate this to the demigod patriarch. Chen Hichan felt like blood was about to spray out of his mouth. Never before had he experienced this level of humiliation, and yet, he knew that he couldn't explain himself in a few short words. With that, his hand blurred as, instead of unleashing a divine ability, he pulled out a transmission jade slip to contact Bai Xiaochun and Li Shundao. Which of you two did it? He transmitted. Damn it, you're completely throwing me under the bus. The two of you had better explain yourselves. When Bai Xiaochun realized that Chen Hichan was sending some messages, he stopped in place and blinked a few times, anticipation rising in his heart. Earlier, both Bai Xiaochun and Li Shundao had been paying attention, and realized what was going on. Bai Xiaochun didn't seem very fazed, but as for Li Shundao, his face fell when he realized the truth. Before he could do anything though, Chen Hichan's message came in. Li Shundao immediately began to wail in his heart. Although he was inclined to deny that he was involved, he could see how crazy Chen Hichan was going, and knew that lying now would only make things worse. So he sent a message back. Brother Chen, it's just a misunderstanding. Really, I asked around just now, and apparently one of the elders in my clan accidentally kidnapped Big Fatty Zhang and Shu Baosai. As soon as the message came in, Chen Hichan whipped his head around to look at Bai Xiaochun. Eyes crimson, he threw the jade slip out and cried, "See that? Well, do you? Your two friends weren't taken by me. I didn't do it. I didn't. It was Li Shundao. You got the wrong person, Bai Xiaochun." Bai Xiaochun caught the jade slip and looked at it, and immediately, anger began to burn in his heart. However, he kept that from showing on his face. Sticking his chin up, he snorted. Well, you can't blame me. Nobody forced you to go around looking like a villain all the time. Whatever. Next time I have any problems like this, I'll just come to you for help. Alright, see you later. With that, he turned and blurred into motion toward Li Shundao's residence. If Chen Hichan hadn't put the pieces of the puzzle together by this point, then he didn't deserve to have lived for so many years. Heaven damned Bai Xiaochun. Does he mean he's going to come cause problems for me whenever he has the slightest inconvenience? He's going to force me to help him whether I'm actually involved or not. Chen Hichan's mood sank further. Were it not for the fact that he was a diva, he would already have been coughing up blood. Off to the side, Zhao Tianzhao looked on, shaking his head and smiling wryly. This Bai Xiaochun is a complete scoundrel. Chen Hichan grumbled angrily. The mere thought of Bai Xiaochun coming to cause problems again in the future caused his vision to go dim. If he had known things would end up like this, he would never have done anything to offend him. What did I do to deserve this? Chen Hichan mourned, wishing he could weep. He felt even worse when he looked around at the devastation caused by the fighting earlier, including countless destroyed buildings and structures. Someone else kidnapped his friends, but he came looking for me, he grumbled angrily. The main thing he was worried about was the possibility of this scenario playing out again, and then another time after that, and so on. However, this is also a good opportunity. If he gets into a fight with Li Shundao, I can make a big fuss about it. The demigod patriarch has surely noticed that Bai Xiaochun came to cause trouble. Although he didn't say anything, if Bai Xiaochun keeps up with this sort of thing, the patriarch will not be pleased. Eyes flashing brightly with anger, he sent a message to Li Shundao, hoping to secure his cooperation in turning the situation into a disaster for Bai Xiaochun. You're setting yourself up for a catastrophe, Bai Xiaochun. Even as Chen Hichan plotted, Bai Xiaochun was weighing matters over in his heart. He hadn't forgotten that the demigod patriarch was in charge of the Starry Sky Dao polarity sect, which meant that it wouldn't be a good idea to push things too far. Now that he had determined who the true culprit was, he knew how he would handle the situation. Pushing forward with incredible speed, he left a string of sonic booms behind him as he headed toward Li Shundao's residence. As he closed in, a stream of diva will erupted out from the Li clan. Li Shundao appeared and said, "Calm down, fellow Taoist Bai. This is a misunderstanding, that's all. A misunderstanding. I've already sent for your two friends. All you have to do is wait for a moment." With that, he clasped hands and bowed, a friendly smile on his face. Considering how short of a temper he had, if this were any other person he was dealing with, he would have attacked immediately and killed them. But he truly feared Bai Xiaochun, and his heart still trembled with terror based on what he had seen back in the river-defying sect. In retrospect, he wished he could go back and do something to put Bai Xiaochun in check before he reached his full potential. But now he was a true chosen of the sect, with a limitless future. He was not the type of person to provoke, and thus, smoothing things out with him right now was obviously the best choice. By now, he had received Chen Hichan's message, and actually agreed with the other diva's plan. And yet, he still wasn't sure of exactly what to do. Until he decided for sure, the best thing was to still put on a show of deference in front of Bai Xiaochun. That way, Bai Xiaochun would look even more unreasonable and domineering to the demigod patriarch. Based on what Li Shendao knew of the demigod patriarch, the man might not necessarily intervene immediately when a diva started throwing his weight around, but he definitely wouldn't be happy. Furthermore, showing deference to Bai Xiaochun wouldn't be a loss of face. After all, they were both devas, so taking the initiative to bow his head was an appropriate thing to do. To Li Shendao, anyone beneath the diva realm was nothing more than a bug. Only people in the same cultivation level as himself counted as powerful experts. When Bai Xiaochun saw that Li Shendao was acting deferentially, his eyes flickered, and he immediately came to the conclusion that something fishy was going on. You kidnap my friends and then tell me to calm down? What the hell, Li Shendao? Li Shendao's eyes flickered, and he backed up a few paces. Seeing that, Bai Xiaochun's eyes narrowed. Taking the initiative to bow his head, and trying to goad me into making a mistake? Well played, Li Shendao. Racing to come up with his next move, he accelerated, and then unleashed an attack. A moment later, he and Li Shendao were fighting back and forth. All of the cultivators on the other rainbows had shifted their attention from Chen Hichan to this new area. As for Chen Hichan himself, his divine sense was locked onto the area as well. Chen Hichan really couldn't contain himself. He hated Bai Xiaochun so much, and was so invested in plotting against him, that he began to chuckle coldly as soon as the fighting broke out. Beat him. The harder the better. Feeling wonderful about how things were going, he kept his focus directed completely on the scene playing out. Least under pressure was Bai Zhenchen, who was also pleased with how things were playing out between Bai Xiaochun and Li Shendao. At the same time, he was feeling very glad that, other than the river-defying sect incident, he had never done anything to build up a grudge between himself and Bai Xiaochun. What an unreasonable lunatic, he thought, sighing. By this point, he realized that something seemed to be a bit off about Li Shendao's actions. But then he thought about what he knew of Chen Hichan, and quickly speculated as to what was going on. It actually made the current situation even more intriguing. As the booms rang out, Li Shendao fell back over and over again. Despite being in the mid-diva realm, he found Bai Xiaochun to be a very tough opponent, with seemingly boundless energy. The divine abilities and magical techniques that Bai Xiaochun had at his disposal were as troublesome for Li Shendao as they were for Chen Hichan, and left him feeling almost completely helpless. What had him feeling even more frustrated was that, as a diva patriarch, there was no way that he would go around causing problems for measly disciples who weren't even in the nascent soul stage. From what he remembered, it was an elder from among his subordinates who had taken Bai Xiaochun's friends. Later, the man had sent one of Li Shendao's own grandsons to ask for his approval in the matter, and for help to make sure that no sect rules were violated. By this point, he truly detested that grandson of his. Although, what irritated him the most was not the trouble itself, but the fact that his grandson hadn't come to remind him of the situation after Bai Xiaochun rose to power. That lack of a reminder was what had led to the current situation. If the matter had been pointed out to him earlier, he could have resolved the situation by numerous means. As he considered all of these things, he decided that since Bai Xiaochun seemed inclined to push things too far, then the best thing was to go along with Chen Hichan's plan. Therefore, he put an even more deferential expression onto his face. Listen to me, Bai, old pal. I already took care of the situation with your friends. They'll be here any moment. There's no need for this fighting. I'll definitely compensate you for everything. When Bai Xiaochun heard that, he snorted coldly in his heart. Taking a step forward, he said, "That's not how this is going to work. I don't really want to beat you up either. But I treated Chen Hichan unfairly earlier, and got in a big fight with him. Now that I have the real culprit in front of me, if I don't beat him up a bit, how would Chen Hichan feel? It just wouldn't be fair. And what would other people think?" Many jaws dropped among the onlookers in response to his words. Strange expressions appeared, and many people even chuckled. At first, Bai Xiaochun's words seemed to make sense, but after thinking about it, most cultivators in the audience realized how nonsensical they were. What is that supposed to mean? He had a misunderstanding with Elder Chen, and therefore has to go beat up Elder Li? Meanwhile, a stream of divine sense from the violet rainbow up above was focused on the events down below. It was the demigod patriarch, who earlier had been a bit irritated at Bai Xiaochun's actions. However, the words he had spoken just now caused the patriarch to smile. All of the irritation he had felt earlier quickly melted away. The patriarch shook his head. He didn't like it when his subordinates started throwing their weight around too much, which could easily get out of control. However, Bai Xiaochun's words just now had revealed his true attitude. Perhaps he had planned all along to word things that way, which would just go to show that Bai Xiaochun was somewhat audacious. People like that were often easy to control. Perhaps he hadn't planned the words out, but that would actually just make the situation more amusing. The truth was that the demigod patriarch was actually very curious about Bai Xiaochun. Furthermore, the reason why he had been so quick to confer him with a title had to do with Du Lingfei. In response to the words Bai Xiaochun had just uttered, Chen Hichan gasped. As for Li Shendao, he gazed deeply at Bai Xiaochun, and suddenly felt more on guard than ever. At the same time, he abandoned any thoughts of going along with Chen Hichan's plan. This guy doesn't just have incredible battle prowess, he's also a profound schemer. Not only did he resolve the situation, he did it brilliantly. A smile broke out on Li Shendao's face, and he clasped hands respectfully. Don't worry, fellow Taoist Bai. Whatever misunderstanding you had with fellow Taoist Chen has nothing to do with the two of us. Maybe this little conflict can be the start of a new friendship. At the moment, Li Shendao actually wasn't very afraid of Bai Xiaochun. In fact, he actually felt no need to cause any problems for him. Bai Xiaochun had already received the approval of the demigod patriarch, and was now just like the other devas, a prime elder of the sect. A single remark from him completely foiled Chen Hichan's plan, a fact that Li Shendao refused to believe the demigod patriarch didn't realize. The fact that the patriarch had still not intervened went to show what was really going on. Well, Li Shendao thought, this is probably the best opportunity to work things out with Bai Xiaochun. He quickly performed an incantation gesture, causing a screen of light to spring out, covering the both of them and giving them a certain level of privacy. Then he patted his bag of holding to produce a jade pendant. The surface of the pendant was carved with 3 dragons and 6 phoenixes, and possessed a remarkable aura. The dragons and phoenixes almost seemed alive, and caused a swirling mist to spring up in the area. A single glance at the pendant would reveal that it was an extraordinary item. Furthermore, it seemed to pulse with the will of the heavens. It was obviously a diva-level magical item. Fellow Taoist Bai, is this your jade pendant? I happened to pick it up earlier, and just realized that, based on the fluctuations, it must belong to you. Smiling, he waved his hand, sending the jade pendant flying over to Bai Xiaochun in a beam of bright light. Although none of the lower-level cultivators could see what was happening, Bai Zhenchen and Chen Hichan were able to observe easily. Bai Zhenchen seemed slightly confused about it, but not Chen Hichan, whose eyes went wide. Never could he have imagined that Li Shendao would use this method to try to work things out with Bai Xiaochun. It actually caused his heart to sink even further. How could this Li Shendao ignore propriety so brazenly? I can't believe he would do something so shameless. As far as Chen Hichan was concerned, Li Shendao was showing how much of a complete rogue he was. Bai Xiaochun seemed surprised as he reached out to grab the pendant. Then he looked back suspiciously at Li Shendao for a moment before his eyes glittered. This old man isn't that bad after all, he thought. Giving gifts to resolve a situation was oftentimes a good method, but could easily come across as insincere. Thankfully, Li Shendao had worded things perfectly, making the situation much more palatable. Bai Xiaochun was starting to calm down quite a bit, and actually resolved to use this method himself in the future. Clearing his throat, he tossed the jade pendant into his bag of holding. What do you know, this is my jade pendant. I knew I dropped it somewhere. It turns out you found it, fellow Taoist Li. Laughing heartily, he decided to see if he could push the envelope a bit. You know what, fellow Taoist Li? I happen to remember that, back when I lost that jade pendant, I also happened to lose a flying sword. A really expensive flying sword. When Li Shendao heard this, his expression turned a bit stiff. However, he patted his bag of holding to produce a small blue sword that sent intense frigid chi out in all directions. As it hovered there in midair, it began to turn translucent, as if it might disappear at any moment. Feeling very pleased, Bai Xiaochun quickly said, "Ha ha ha. That sword is a family heirloom. Many thanks, fellow Taoist Li." He made a grasping motion, causing the sword to fly over to him. After fondling it admiringly for a moment, he put it into his bag of holding. "Congratulations, fellow Taoist Bai," Li Shendao said, chuckling. "At long last, your belongings have been returned to you. By the way, the elder who snatched your friends did it without permission, and had help from someone else from the junior generation. Don't worry, I'll definitely provide compensation to make up for their mistake. As far as Li Shendao was concerned, material things, and even the two culprits, were not worth anything when compared to resolving the grievance with Bai Xiaochun. By now, Bai Xiaochun realized that he couldn't continue to cause problems. In fact, he was just about to say something more when his expression flickered. Then, he and Li Shendao both looked down at the Li clan ancestral mansion below. There, Big Fatty Zhang and Xu Baosai had just stepped out into the open. Their faces both shone with healthy glows, and they wore sumptuous garments. Not a single wound or injury could be seen on either of them. They were escorted by a throng of Li clan cultivators, who treated them with the utmost respect. However, both of them had blank expressions on their faces, as if they had been caught completely unprepared by what was happening. Clearly, the Li clan had scrambled to make all of this happen. When Bai Xiaochun saw that Big Fatty Zhang and Xu Baosai were both in good condition, he breathed a sigh of relief. Smiling, he looked over at them, waved his hand, and called out a greeting. Big Fatty Zhang looked back at him in shock, seemingly unwilling to believe his own eyes. As for Xu Baosai, when he caught sight of Bai Xiaochun, he gasped, and his eyes went wide in disbelief. Xiaochun, you're not dead. Bai Xiaochun cleared his throat, flicked his sleeve, and loudly said, how could there possibly be anything in this heaven and earth that could lead Bai Xiaochun into death? A strange expression appeared on Li Shendao's face. However, Xu Baosai and Big Fatty Zhang were used to Bai Xiaochun saying things like this. Therefore, it was at this point that the joy of being reunited with their old friend overtook their faces. You're finally back, Xiaochun. Big Fatty Zhang rushed forward and embraced Bai Xiaochun. He had gained weight recently, and although he didn't quite look like a mountain of flesh, he was still not thin by any means. In fact, his fat quivered with excitement as he hugged Bai Xiaochun. When Xu Baosai recovered his composure, he hurried forward and instinctively began to offer some flattery. Junior Patriarch, you are definitely the most ultimate of chosen. Unmatched and unparalleled in the world. There is absolutely, positively nothing in this heaven and earth that could possibly lead sect Uncle Bai into death. What's so amazing about the wildlands anyway? When Bai Xiaochun heard the excitement in Big Fatty Zhang's voice, and the flattery of Xu Baosai, warm happiness rose up inside of him. Back when he was out in the wildlands, he had worried constantly about his friends Big Fatty Zhang and Xu Baosai, who he had left behind in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. Clearing his throat, Li Shendao interrupted Bai Xiaochun's reunion to warmly say, your friends are back, Bai, old pal. Don't worry, I'll definitely provide you with handsome compensation for all of this. Big Fatty Zhang and Xu Baosai were both taken aback by what Li Shendao had just said. After all, despite the many years they had spent in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect, they hadn't had many dealings with devas, and thus didn't immediately recognize Li Shendao. However, they could tell that he was someone important. Otherwise, why would they have been escorted like royalty out of the Li clan? Not only had they been given urgent treatment of their injuries, they had been treated with utmost respect. In fact, they had also been showered with gifts, along with pleas not to take their imprisonment to heart. Neither of them could ever have imagined that they would be given so many gifts. However, when they realized that it was because Bai Xiaochun had used some unknown means to secure the help of someone extremely important in the sect, they were deeply shaken. Bai Xiaochun glanced at Li Shendao, then looked back at Big Fatty Zhang and Xu Baosai. Thumping his chest, he said, eldest brother, Brother Baosai, what do you two think? You must have had it pretty bad off recently. If there are any points of discontent you have, or anything in particular that you want, just say the word. Li Shendao smiled wryly, but didn't say anything. Instead, he looked expectantly at Big Fatty Zhang and Xu Baosai. All the other Li clan cultivators also looked over nervously at Big Fatty Zhang and Xu Baosai, pleading looks in their eyes. The two of them blinked awkwardly and exchanged glances, simultaneously rubbing their bags of holding. After all, they already had been given copious amounts of treasure. Then they thought back to their imprisonment. Although it had been somewhat humiliating, they hadn't been in any mortal danger. It had only lasted for about a year, and in exchange, they had been given nearly 100 years' worth of cultivation resources. With such thoughts on their minds, they looked back at Bai Xiaochun and shook their heads. Bai Xiaochun wasn't inclined to let things go so easily, especially considering the weak position Li Shendao was in. However, it didn't seem appropriate to push the matter. Nodding, he clasped hands to Li Shendao, and then took Big Fatty Zhang and Xu Baosai with him as he left. Afterward, the Li clan cultivators finally breathed sighs of relief. At the same time, Li Shendao's expression turned very grim and cold. Bring Li Yuansheng and that elder over here immediately. The rumbling thunder of his voice struck fear into the hearts of everyone in the clan. Obviously, the time had come to settle accounts. Furthermore, it wouldn't just be Li Yuansheng who was punished for what had occurred, it would be his entire bloodline. Considering how angry the patriarch was, no one dared to try to beg for mercy. Besides, nobody wanted to incur the further wrath of the most glorious figure in the sect right now, the diva patriarch, Bai Xiaochun. After all, not even their own Li clan patriarch had been able to stand up to him. Bai Xiaochun was bursting with happiness as he slowly led Big Fatty Zhang and Shu Baosai across the blue rainbow toward his immortals cave, reminiscing the entire way. It almost felt like they had gone back in time to when they had first arrived in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. Although Big Fatty Zhang and Shu Baosai were happy to be reunited, they also couldn't stop thinking about how suddenly everything had just changed for them. Finally, Big Fatty Zhang asked, "Xiaochun, which member of the senior generation was that just now?" He could tell that Bai Xiaochun's cultivation base has made significant advancement. However, despite the fact that he himself was in the late core formation stage, he still couldn't assess its exact level. Shu Baosai was only in early core formation, and as such, had even less of an idea of how strong Bai Xiaochun was. However, he could tell that there was something different and mysterious about him. In fact, if he closed his eyes, it was literally impossible for him to detect Bai Xiaochun's presence. Him? Bai Xiaochun blinked, and his eyebrows shot up. Oh, that was Li Shundao. Li Shundao? Why does that name sound familiar? Big Fatty Zhang couldn't place who the name belonged to. However, Shu Baosai had a reputation for being able to know everything about a place, no matter where he went. Therefore, when he heard the name, Li Shundao, his eyes went wide, and he gasped. Li Shundao, he blurted. One of the 5 diva patriarchs of the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect? That Li Shundao. In response to Shu Baosai's words, Big Fatty Zhang's jaw dropped. I remember now, he said. Li Shundao is the diva patriarch of the Li clan. He was the one who ordered Shu Baosai and me to be arrested. Xiaochun, you have no idea how wicked the Li clan is. Shaken, Big Fatty Zhang went on to explain to Bai Xiaochun everything which had occurred in the years he had been gone. Back when Bai Xiaochun left for the Great Wall, Big Fatty Zhang had been forming his will core. Neither he nor Shu Baosai had qualified to leave the sect, and thus had no choice but to stay behind in Sky City to manage the business at Bai Xiaochun's inn. With guidance from Feng Yude, Big Fatty Zhang had eventually succeeded in his breakthrough. Because of his unique will core, he had achieved even greater success with his spirit enhancements. Furthermore, his battle prowess actually surpassed ordinary cultivators in his same cultivation level. Eventually, he rose through the ranks of the Starry Sky Dao Polarity superstars and came to be viewed as one of the top chosen in the sect. Perhaps because of Big Fatty Zhang's rise to prominence, Shu Baosai also achieved a higher level of success. He never truly became one of the superstars. However, he was careful to make the right friends in the sect, and avoid offending anyone important. Things had proceeded like that for some time, with Big Fatty Zhang making the most progress in his cultivation base. Eventually, word came back to the sect that Bai Xiaochun had gone missing, which was very upsetting to Big Fatty Zhang and Shu Baosai. Although they wanted to go back to the river-defying sect, the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect was not the type of place where they could come and go whenever they wanted. Therefore, they continued to act with the utmost caution within the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. However, because Bai Xiaochun was missing, the Li clan chosen Li Yuansheng finally came back for revenge. With Bai Xiaochun out of the picture, he felt confident enough to strike at Bai Xiaochun's inn in Sky City, and take it away from Big Fatty Zhang and Shu Baosai. During the process, he injured Shu Baosai so badly that, if Big Fatty Zhang hadn't been there to save him, he would have been killed. The grudge with Li Yuansheng had started many years ago, and his act of taking the inn away made it even worse. Unfortunately, Big Fatty Zhang and Shu Baosai weren't strong enough to do anything about it, and were forced to simply grit their teeth in frustration. Thankfully, Bai Xiaochun's old friend Zhao Tianzhao had come back to the sect by that time, and was able to look out for them. The two of them were aware of the friction between the river-defying sect and the other 3 sects in the middle reaches, but being mere core formation cultivators, they couldn't get back to the sect easily. Therefore, Big Fatty Zhang had focused hard on his cultivation in an attempt to break into the top 20 of the Starry Sky Dao Polarity superstars. According to the rules of the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect, the disciples in the top 20 were considered official chosen within the sect. If Big Fatty Zhang could reach that rank, then he would qualify to return to the river-defying sect. Big Fatty Zhang went crazy with his cultivation. One year, he finally achieved his breakthrough and reached the late will core stage. That was when he went to make his attempt at the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars. However, it was at around the same time that Li Yuansheng also reached late core formation, leading to a big competition between the two of them. Li Yuansheng was a chosen, but in terms of battle prowess, he couldn't match up to Big Fatty Zhang with his will core. Therefore, Big Fatty Zhang defeated him, breaking into the top 20 and leaving Li Yuansheng behind in 21st place. The conflict between them grew more intense after that, until it reached the breaking point. Ignoring the possibility of offending Bai Xiaochun's old friends, Li Yuansheng called upon the power of his clan to frame Big Fatty Zhang and Xu Baosai. He even begged for help from his patriarch Li Shendao and a nascent soul elder, which ended up with Big Fatty Zhang and Xu Baosai being arrested. If Big Fatty Zhang hadn't broken through into the top 20 of the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars, then Li Yuansheng would have gone so far as to have him killed. But Big Fatty Zhang had achieved a high enough status that not even Diva Patriarch Li Shendao dared to end his life. Instead, he had the two of them imprisoned. Li Yuansheng hadn't been willing to give up, and called upon his connections in the sect to have their sentence officially set at a full 60-year cycle. That was the reason why Big Fatty Zhang and Xu Baosai hadn't returned to the sect to help during the war. They had both been imprisoned, and didn't even know about what was happening on the outside. When Bai Xiaochun heard about all of this, his expression turned grimmer and grimmer. Now that he knew the truth about everything the Li clan had done, his heart turned as cold as ice. And it all stemmed from the years-long grudge between himself and Li Yuansheng. Eldest brother, Xu Baosai, he said through gritted teeth. I'm definitely going to get you some major compensation for this. Let's wait and see how exactly Li Shendao handles the matter. If it doesn't meet with my approval, or if he tries to cover for Li Yuansheng, then I'll just go beat the crap out of him. With that, he snorted coldly. In response to his words, Big Fatty Zhang and Xu Baosai exchanged awkward glances. A moment passed, and then Xu Baosai said, Junior Patriarch, Li Shendao is a diva. Bai Xiaochun stuck his chin up and flicked his sleeve. Who gives a crap that he's a diva, he said proudly. I'm a diva too. Big Fatty Zhang and Xu Baosai were visibly stunned. In fact, his words were so shocking that they didn't actually dare to believe him. Big Fatty Zhang stepped forward nervously and felt Bai Xiaochun's forehead. Xiaochun, are you okay? I really am a diva, Bai Xiaochun said, not sure whether to laugh or cry. Oh, Xiaochun, you don't need to explain. We believe you. Changing the subject, Big Fatty Zhang said, oh, right. Who did you get to convince Li Shendao to let us go? Nobody, eldest brother. However, instead of finishing his sentence, he looked up at a group of 7 or 8 disciples who had just come out from the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars trials, and were preparing to leave the rainbow. Hey you, come over here and tell my friends who I am. The disciples were initially taken aback, but then quickly flew over and offered respectful bows. Greetings, Patriarch Bai. Big Fatty Zhang and Xu Baosai were stunned. They actually knew 2 of these disciples, who were both in the top 50 of the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars. One of them was actually a top chosen who was in the teens in terms of the rankings. Stop joking around, Xiaochun. Big Fatty Zhang said, panting a bit, still not quite able to convince himself that it was true. As for Xu Baosai, he was trembling, and his eyes shone with profound shock. I really am a diva. I'm the 6th diva of the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. Having no other way to convince them, he unleashed the power of his cultivation base. Everything began to shake, and crashing sounds filled the air like thunder. At the same time, Bai Xiaochun's face appeared high above in the air, looking down superciliously at all creation. His will descended from above like the will of the heavens. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.